So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the weekly conversations of the European Training Foundation under the title Learning Connects, which are taking place on all platforms, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. Today's topic is training teachers of the future. I kindly ask all speakers to please mute yourselves because there was a bit of an echo. Thank you very much. And also my colleague, Michela, please all mute it for a second. So I was saying that this afternoon we talk about training teachers of the future, discussing in this month's campaign, which is focusing on the future of education. So how can teachers be ready for the future? We'll discuss about this with the distinguished speakers of this afternoon's conversation, which I'm about to introduce. So welcome to the conversation, Tina Saric, Director of ERISEE, the Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe. Welcome, Tina. Thank you for being with us. I'd like to welcome my colleague Arjen, Senior Specialist in Qualification Systems of the European Training Foundation. Welcome, Arjen. And welcome to my colleague Julian Stanley, Vet Teachers and Trainers Specialist at the European Training Foundation. Welcome, Julian.
Great to be here.
And welcome to all of you, wherever you are. As we usually do every week, please raise your hand, say hi, let us know where you're from. And we won't hesitate to bring you into the conversation and also send your questions. And I'm sure our speakers will want to answer to all your curiosities, if they can, of course. Okay, so there is, it's not by chance that we are talking about training teachers of the future today, because today the European Training Foundation is promoting the results of an international research into vocational teachers from 9 countries in the EU neighborhood: Albania, Algeria, Belarus, Kosovo, Moldova, Montenegro, Serbia, Tunisia, and Turkey. And this study is entitled Listening to Vocational Teachers and Principals. And I'm looking here at my colleague Julian, because this study is impressive, because it's based on a survey of over 10,000 teachers and 750 schools principals. So Julian, who run the study, the floor for the first question is yours. What does the survey tell us about professional development of vocational teachers? Julian, over to you, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for that introduction, Daria. Just to share with everyone my excitement and the excitement of everyone at ETF at the launch of this publication. As you say, it's been quite a while in making it. It's taken quite a long time to get here, and it's been an enormous effort by many teachers and those who are supporting education across these 9 countries. So first of all, it's been a massive effort of international collaboration. And the reason why we made this massive effort is to find out more about teachers, about their needs, and about their points of view. And everyone knows that teachers are important. I mean, every policymaker says teachers are important. We have to help our teachers. I mean, our concern has been really to try and understand how things are from the teacher's perspective, to try and listen to teachers, to try and listen to principals, and hear how they see things. Not because they're always right, they're not always right, but just because it's important if we are going to get improvements, to hear how they see it, to understand their perspective, rather than imposing reforms which may go completely against what they think is important. I think I'd like to sort of address this first question about professional development. I think everyone has agreed and has been for some time that professional development is incredibly important, because basically, well, the skills that learners need are changing, the technologies are changing, the learners themselves are changing, the process of teaching is to some extent changing. So because all these things are changing, teachers themselves need more education. They need training to adapt, to learn, not as if they don't know anything at all, but to build upon what they know and to adapt and build upon that. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot from this research. We've learned, for example, that 2/3 of teachers did have some professional development in the 12 months prior to the survey. About half of that was out of school. About 40% of that was within schools. The levels of participation do vary quite a lot. So, for example, we found in Albania, Moldova, Montenegro, and Serbia, the levels of participation of teachers were not that much below OECD average levels. They were relatively, normal. Other countries not so high. In some countries, we saw big progress because we had done this survey already back in 2016. And therefore we were able to see the progress against that time. So, for example, there was quite large progress of 20% in both Albania and Montenegro. So there's evidence of improvements there. I think one of the main concerns is that a lot of the professional development is of quite a general character. So, for example, only 40% of teachers in the survey report that they participated in professional development which focused upon their vocational specialism rather than upon administration or upon some general curriculum reform. Around 50% said that they participated in professional development which was linked to the workplace. So, for example, which was given by employers or took place on the employer's premises. Here I should mention that Turkey is exceptionally strong in this area. Some 59% of vocational teachers did participate in this kind of professional development. So that's an area of strength, I think, from which other countries might learn. I think that another possible concern is the volume of professional development. I mean, it's one thing to talk about a basic participation. It's another thing to talk about the number of hours which we're getting. Now, 30 hours per year is a bit of an international benchmark for the amount of professional development which teachers need. Of course, not all teachers can be expected to achieve that, but it's a kind of mark against which to compare performance. We found that over these 9 countries, only, I think, 31% of teachers, 31% of vocational teachers did actually obtain 30 hours of professional development in the course of the 12 months. So I guess that's a base. It's something which countries can learn from and build upon into the future. Thank you, Daria.
Thank you very much, Julian, and congratulations on this impressive exercise, which sets also a good baseline for a comparative analysis, which can inform policy making and improve the quality of teachers training, not only in the countries concerned by the study. Before we go to Arjen for a follow-up on this, I'd like to say hello to all those who are taking the time to say hello to us, which we appreciate. So we have Adnan from Pakistan, we have Georgie from India, we have Ahmed, Amel from Tunisia, Vitali from Russia, Kenul from Azerbaijan, Hussein from Lebanon, Joanna from Greece, Farai from Libya, Hajid from Algeria. Sorry, you are so many and I keep on. So Margarita, I think, from Armenia, Claudia from Lisbon, Lukia from Athens, Alla Kirita from Moldova, Kazimov from Azerbaijan, Bart from Uganda. Mimosa from Albania, Rashid, Angela from Moldova, Rana from Lebanon. Okay, the rest I'll mention later because the numbers are growing so fast, and Turkey. So thank you so much for being with us. Keep on saying where you are from, because what you say is giving us the measure of the geographical scope of this conversation, which is precisely what is of great interest for the European Training Foundation. But Arjen, as senior experts in qualification systems, and we are talking here about teachers and teachers of the future. In your view, how is the work of vocational teachers and trainers changing, and what new skills do they need to do their job successfully? These are also very special times that we are living across the globe. Arjen.
Yes, well, as Julian said, many of them had training and rather general content. But actually, and the question is this enough to keep up to date, and is it enough to address change? And what kind of change do they have to deal with? Last year, we did also another piece of research, which looked at a literature study, where we've been trying to see how in the literature the changing role of teachers is described. So, of course, we know all about the digital transformation, and we have lived the digital transformation the past year. But, of course, there's a lot more changes. There are new teaching and learning approaches. Many countries have started with competency-based education, meaning that they define what needs to be taught in learning outcomes rather than in content. They don't say, you have to teach this, you have to teach that. They have to say, this is what the learner should know at the end of the learning process. So that changes very much. It opens up the learning process. It gives the teachers the possibility to be much more flexible. Also, we see that more and more students come from different backgrounds. There is, of course, in Europe, a lot of migration, but also between partner countries. And also we see that there are more elder learners coming into the learning process. So they have different requirements. And there's also a climate change. We all are aware of it. Also, contracts are changing. VET graduates do not necessarily enroll as blue-collar workers in a factory, getting a salary every month. Many people are self-employed or starting their own business or working online. So new forms of entrepreneurship, they become much more important. And of course, also we are in a connected world. We are here connected in different places. So we all need to be able to connect and to collaborate online and to collaborate much more because we are physically away from each other. So there are three areas that we have more or less defined as key. The first one is new teaching approaches. This is about learner-centered approaches because it's about learners that have to learn and teachers that have to support them in their learning. And also, of course, the e-educator, learning online, using digital tools, or also collaborative and open learning. So not only more the teacher and the class, but very much also people learning together. Open learning, so not only in the classroom, but also outside the classroom. People can learn everywhere. Also, new skills areas are important. Of course, digital society competence. It's not only about digital competence, but it's also about how do you distinguish the alternative facts from the real facts? How do you deal with data protection? Also, intercultural competence becomes more important. Also because learning becomes more international, but also because learners become more international. Green competence means we have new attitudes. And entrepreneurial competences, of course, are also important. But for teachers, it becomes more and more important to keep up to date, to follow these changes, to take initiative, to become active teachers, active learners, so lifelong learners. And for that also, it becomes very important that they work together with other colleagues. For instance, in a modular approach, they are supposed to mix theory and practice. So what we're now doing is, of course, what comes out of this is quite a holistic picture of a quite new teacher. And what we're trying now to do is a reality check. Is this really feasible for every teacher to become this person? And that's where we're now working on.
Thank you, Arjen. It looks like a super teacher that we are portraying here, and which we, I'm sure every teacher is aiming for, but also, and this will come later in the discussion, an efficient system is to be there so as to enable also the improvement and the continuous development of professionals of learning. I hear an echo. If you can mute yourselves while you're not intervening. I'd like now to actually, sorry, there is a nice comment from Nivine who's saying, hello, I want to ask if someone has a certificate and want to be a teacher in school and how to do a super teacher. So we can thank you, Nivine, for bringing forward this nice invention, which I just gave. It's not, of course, a scientific name, the one I gave. I'd like now to go to the lady who is kindly part of this conversation, Tina Saric from ERISEE. First, maybe it would be very interesting if you can share with the audience what the Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe is and why it's relevant to the conversation. And then my question for you would be, why are teachers and trainers so important for the future of training and learning in Southeast Europe? And I've seen that we have many followers from your region. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here. And I'm also extending my greetings to all the followers. I see they're coming from very many different countries. So I'm really thrilled to be here and have this opportunity. So you asked me about Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe. So we are an intergovernmental organization established by the Ministers of Education from 7 countries from Southeastern European region. And our mandate is to enhance the national reforms that take place in that region through regional activities, through training activities, webinars, seminars, conferences, regional projects, and so on. We are also tackling the issue of teachers and how to increase competences of teachers, but maybe more from a policy level. And I would say that in our work, we have really established the understanding of the importance of teacher in our region. I would say maybe from 3 levels. And this is not, of course, only important for our region. This goes for, I think, every country and every region in the world. This is the importance of teachers for the personal, first of all, like personal attitudes of students, so how they perceive themselves. So here, together with the families and with the media, teachers have an enormous impact on how the students perceive themselves, how they perceive their competencies, their ability to grow, and so on. Then the second aspect in which the teachers really have an enormous impact is, of course, the professional development. So what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge the learners will acquire so that once they reach this maturity age, they can successfully participate in the labor market. And of course, there is also another component. So how they react to the world, so teachers have the influence on what attitudes the students create towards world. So is it a safe place? Is it like a nurturing place? Is it a dangerous or threatening place, and so on? So I think I would go along with what you so precisely described, teachers being a super teachers, because there are so many demands on teachers that we place on them. So, I mean, I think I would like to add, when we talk about the development of teachers. So Julian and Arjen, they mentioned, let's say, the general trainings and vocational trainings. But I think we really need to start thinking about personal development trainings, because there is a lot of burden on teachers, how to be super teachers, how to handle 30 students in one class, digital, online, physical, keeping up to date with everything that is happening in the modern world, from professional level. I mean, handling conflicts, communication. I think they're really, we should also extend our training opportunities to this kind of personal development programs in terms of handling stress, handling all those requirements that their teachers are requested nowadays.
Thank you very much, Tina. I'd like to flag that while you were speaking, there were a number of comments saying how true and how people were agreeing with what you were saying. So I think you really touched upon some thoughts which are deeply felt by the teachers community, I would say worldwide, because this is our geographic scope for this conversation. And Ofa is saying just now, exactly, personal development for teacher is the key component for being a successful teacher. As you know, dear friends who are following from anywhere in the world, we are keeping on in the conversation, we'll be keeping in the conversation your questions. And there is one whom I'd like to address to Julian from Regina Gokai, I hope I pronounced it correctly, who is saying, how can we contribute in teacher trainings? Is there a pool of experts where we can be involved? I actually am a professor at Faculty of Education in a public university in Albania, and I'm also teacher trainer certified from Councils of Europe's Personality program. Julian, how can the community of teachers trainer actually contribute to this conversation?
Well, I very much welcome Regina's interest, and I should say that one of the things that we're increasingly looking to support is people coming forward, either from the teacher training profession or indeed from the teacher profession, who want themselves to play a lead role in working with other practitioners. Because we believe that very often these are the people who are close to the profession who are best equipped to support innovation and to support further development, because after all, they are teachers and they understand what it is like, and they are able precisely to personalize and to connect new skills to real people. I would say there are a couple of things going on. I mean, first of all, ETF has got something called Open Space, which is a network for people interested in teaching and other parts of vocational learning. So by joining Open Space, which you register to join, my colleague will post a link to it in a second. That's a way that you can get involved in the conversation and signal what your interests are, what kind of experience you have. And through that, I think opportunities may well arise. The other thing I would say, if I can just sort of flag this up, is the ETF is planning to launch later in the year a particular community for what we're calling innovative practitioners, practitioners who want to help to introduce new pedagogies or help teachers to operate with new technologies, for example. If you're particularly interested in that, maybe the best thing to do would be to send me a message, and I'm having difficulty here actually posting this, but perhaps I could ask
we can do
Michaela to post my email address in the chat, because for some reason I'm unable to do it. But send me a message, and I'll make a record of your name, and then when when we're actually trying to invite people to join this community, you'll receive an invitation.
Thank you very much, Julian, for taking on board the conversation. So indeed, Michaela will be, who is our colleague, who is actually making this conversation possible from a technical point of view, will be sharing Julian's email across all platforms, and she's just shared the link to Open Space. Before going back to you, Julian, for some more details on the result of the research, since you mentioned innovation, I'd like to ask Arjen, are there some countries which are already changing the way that they are educating and training their teachers? What's your overview on that? You're muted, Arjen, sorry. Try to speak.
Yes, okay, it works. So this has been ongoing already, because all these teacher training requirements have been changing already for quite some time. So it's not that this is now suddenly starting. We're starting from the teacher role has been stable for all these years, and now we're going to make a massive change. There has been always change in the past years. And for instance, in Finland, they have moved to, with their FET reform in 2018, they moved to sort of ageless FET. They have integrated adult learning and the training of young people in one approach, which is mixed, where also learners who are adults, who are only following part of the program, sit together in the classrooms or participate in practice or whatever they do, together with all the learners. So the teachers there must be able to deal both with the adult learners and the young learners. Then in Estonia some time ago, in many of our partner countries, we have actually quite a strong specialization of that teachers. You have those teachers who teach general education subjects. You have those teachers who teach the specialized subjects, but the theory of the VET that they are doing, and there are those, they're called production masters or instructors who do the technical training, and then there are also the trainers in industry. What they've done in Estonia is to say we need one profile for all these, rather than having people that are specialized in all these, because we need to have a flexible teaching workforce that can play multiple roles, and people need to understand both the practical aspects as well as the theoretical aspects of what has to be learned. So that's also something that has been ongoing for some time already. Then there are a number of our partner countries that are developing new profiles. They have either sectoral frameworks, or they have they're looking at specific teacher qualifications. So we have several. Also, there's a huge surge in training in companies. It has become really more popular than it was before. So there's much more attention to teachers in companies and trainers in companies. And for instance, there's a project that has been led by the Latvians, but also with involvement of other Baltic states and Finland, where they've been really looking at the teachers, the trainers that are working in industry. Of course, we have also seen with Selfie and Selfie Edu, there are a lot of requirements in those tools too. And these kind of standards, these competency frameworks, also change the way teachers themselves change the requirements. And also at the level of schools themselves, sometimes they define also for our school, these teachers must be able to meet these requirements. So it's not only that these are standards set at national level, they could be international, they could be at the school level, there could be just a group of professional teachers, a community of practice that decides this is what is important for us. So of course with COVID, all these things have become different, because COVID is really putting a lot of new demands. And we had a discussion on those requirements that I was mentioning with Israeli colleagues last week. And they really said to us, yeah, but what we miss in those profiles is actually the social and emotional competences that our teachers need now that they move back to school. They have all had these students who've been out of contact for quite some time. They have been a little bit derailed. How are we going to get them back on track? And those competences also need to be discussed. So I think we're dealing here with situations that are going to evolve further. And we are starting now this conversation with teachers on trying to define what are the needs and what are the priorities and how can this develop further.
Thank you very much, Arjen. Actually, I think that the fact that you've pointed out the impact of COVID is and how this is affecting the education system is something that brings me back to Julian, because I'd like he knows that I'd like to stretch his expertise, and now I mean, my question for you, Julian, is what have we learned and what are the findings in the research about the way that vocational teachers teach and work? But what have we learned from a pre-COVID phase that we could translate in a hopefully soon to come post-COVID phase? Julian.
Okay, well, thanks for the question and thanks for the extra twist. I mean, I think to start off with, I mean, one of the things we found, which perhaps I didn't expect to find, is that teachers believe that they're using a mixture of both traditional and modern ways of teaching and learning, modern pedagogies. So I think the prejudice that teachers in transition countries are only using old-fashioned methods is not fair. If you ask teachers what they're doing, that's not how they see it. They see themselves explicitly using a whole range of pedagogies, modern pedagogies as well as old-fashioned ones. So not just talking from the front, but also having group work, not just getting people to repeat tasks, but also differentiated tasks. When you do the analysis, it turns out that the traditional pedagogies are more prevalent. They're more dominant. But teachers are a bit sort of inhibited. They're a bit constrained, sometimes because of the way things are timetabled. Practical lessons are timetabled separately. They don't always. It's not always possible for them to be as flexible as they'd like. But I think it's interesting that there's a motivation there to use more modern pedagogies. And I think perhaps to pick up the second part of your question, we've seen under COVID that when the situation has changed, the rules have changed, teachers have actually been pretty quick to make changes. So, perhaps, the lesson is, there is more of a readiness perhaps to make change, but it's taken a bit of a shock to do so. Of course, unfortunately, some of the changes in pedagogy have been forced. They've not been the ones that teachers have wanted to make. They've been adapting to circumstances and to limited resources and so on and so forth. But if we can get, those resources right, then perhaps the lesson of COVID is that there is a readiness and a willingness to take a bit of a risk if the circumstances are right. Teachers do seem to be very keen to try and make the connection with the world of work. I mean, 75% of teachers see themselves as always trying to get the connection between learning in the classroom and learning in the workplace. But as I say, quite often they don't have the equipment, or they don't have access to the room that they want, and their capacity for having direct connections to employers is much more limited. I think only 50% say that they're able to bring learners and employers into direct contact on a regular basis. Of course, that has become even more difficult under COVID, and access to learning in the workplace is one of the forms that vocational learning has suffered most. So that's something which we haven't solved at the moment, and only gradually we're getting going again. I mean, one point I'd like to make, picking up on something that Arjen said, is that there's surprisingly little collaboration between vocational teachers in their work. I mean, it's perhaps a bit disappointing, but teaching is still largely an individual job. Teachers plan their own lessons, they teach them by themselves, they have responsibility for their own work. I mean, when asked, only 52% of teachers said that they had planned discussions about their work with their colleagues over the last month. Oh, that's 50%, that's half of them. But it's a relatively limited form of collaboration. It's rather an old understanding of what professional work is like. Professional work, something you're trained as a professional, then you carry out all by yourselves. But increasingly professionals, are not trained and are not expected to work in that way. They're expected to work in groups where they complement skills, where they improve their work together. So I think, we do need to think about how teachers can be supported, encouraged and assisted to work in a more collaborative way. Now, turning to the COVID situation, we see that under COVID, teachers have been supported by central services to learn the skills to run the new technologies. But in fact, equally important has been the support they've got from their peers. Teachers would not have been able to overcome the lockdown and to keep teaching had it not been that they could turn to their colleagues or their children or their friends to help them to learn how to do it. So collaboration and peer learning has been absolutely essential, and I think that should make us think about how we can make that work better, more conventionally, after we get back into working, teaching and learning within learning organizations, within schools and training centers.
Thank you very much, Julian. Actually, collaboration and more peer learning and how to make this work more conventionally when things were slowly but hopefully soon going back to normal. Tina, we have now this precious treasure of opinions, of views of more than 10,000 interviewees. Why is it important for education policymakers to listen to what teachers have got to say? How this exercise can contribute to improving the system from your perspective?
Yes, I think Julian mentioned a couple of times in his intervention the collaboration and communication, and I think this is really crucial. I will just go back to the study that we did a year ago, which was the study on the skills needs analysis. So what skills the teachers in general need, and what are the systems to identify their needs. And we found out that all the economies of the region that I cover have their systems of identifying the teacher's needs. However, what is done with this data and how it relates to the policy making and even to the school level is not clear. So obviously the communication channels don't work. Usually what happens is that we have something imposed from the policymakers down to the teachers, and then they implement it. But there is no two-way communication. I think this is something that absolutely needs to change if we want effective education. And I think the situation with COVID, as was mentioned earlier, so teachers were really crucial in how they organized themselves, how they taught from one another, how they exchanged their practices. So they made it work. However, the way it was done was that from the policy level, they got some kind of instructions and then they played with it. But the policy level did not hear the feedback from the teachers, how it actually works in practice. And I think here, there is the missing link. So you can plan at the level of theory how it should be done, but then you really do need the feedback how it works, and then we can make improvements. But also, I would like to add that teachers themselves, they do not have the practice of asking for feedback from their students or from the parents. So they're also in this position that they kind of present it to the students, but they don't hear how those practices actually work for the students. And I think so the teachers also need to work on this communication skills and see what can be improved. And I think only in this atmosphere of open communication where certain feedback is not seen as criticism, but as an opportunity to learn and to improve, can we go forward.
Thank you very much, Tina. And in this spirit of open communication, I'd like to keep the promise with our followers to bring their comments and questions into the conversation. There is Mohammed from Gaza, who is thanking us for the inspiring presentation, touching the emerging needs responding to COVID-19. However, we have many challenges in the assessment of distance learning activities, especially assessing the practical skills and competencies at the end of vocational training. Can you provide practical solutions? Not sure we can provide practical solutions, but I think we can definitely put the assessment, the digital assessment into the conversation. Who'd like to take this on board? Julian, Arjen? Arjen. Over to you.
Yeah, we saw this problem of assessment already a year ago, and we have organized a number of webinars to discuss this, because we've seen this in many countries, actually, that it was very difficult to keep not only teaching going, but also assessment, of course. And if you don't assess the students, then they can't progress. So they get stuck. They are in the middle of, they come into a vacuum. And some of them also switch off because they don't know where they're going anymore. So it is very important. Now, what we saw is that many countries decided to postpone, but postpone is not a decision. Some have decided to say, okay, we don't need anymore these big assessments at the end, the high risk assessment at the end of all the studies. We should make better use of what we can do in between. So that is what we've seen. For instance, we had some good examples from Finland also again, but also other countries that have started with a modular way of assessing, and also more focus on not on measuring assessment as summative assessment, but also much more focus on formative assessment, giving feedback to students, and also introducing self-assessment. Let them assess their own progress, reflect on their own progress, and also involve fellow students, peer assessment, so that people could actually, and also introduce more, and there was a very interesting example from Egypt, where they introduced more experiments, so that students themselves could do some work at home that they would otherwise have to do in a workshop under guidance by themselves, creating also, elaborating, researching also on the internet, because they use the internet for the vocational students, and opening a new ways of learning for them, and reporting on that. And they developed a series of assignments for students in which they developed quite interesting skills. So there are ways, of course, you can't really replace, if you are a hairdresser, doing this exercise online. It's not possible, but there are things you can do online. And actually, that's one of the things I wanted to say also, because I saw also there was another comment about how are we going to motivate our teachers, the students, if this situation continues. And one of the problems, of course, is that remote teaching, in the beginning at least, was very much the same teaching that we did in the classroom, but just online. But actually, e-learning offers all kinds of other ways of learning. And those are not sufficiently explored. Those are not sufficiently developed. It's not just switching the learning from the classroom to Zoom, but it is also to try to introduce new ways of learning. For instance, introducing games, introducing new tools. And we saw actually also on open space that there are quite a lot of tools that are around, and teachers are actually actively using them. They're experimenting with them, and the experimentation also starts with learners. So if we can activate the learners, I mean, the role of teachers as a coach or as a mentor of their fellow teachers is really becoming very important under COVID, because we all need to continue to go on. So that role becomes much more important than the source of knowledge. The source of knowledge is becoming more and more the internet. And the teacher is more the one that explains the knowledge, summarizes it, but helps people to learn, to develop their own learning. So that is also changing under COVID.
Thank you, Arjen. Sorry for interrupting. Please continue.
No, it's fine. No, please.
No, I just wanted to flag that. Thank you, Arjen, for picking up Mohammed's question from Gaza. And I'd like to ask my colleague Michaela to please share again the link to Open Space. So if Mohammed wants to join this online community, most resources are stored there, and you will be able to engage in the conversation with other practitioners from the learners community, and eventually also get some insights and inspiration and references that Arjen was mentioning earlier on. When I asked who wanted to answer to this question, both Arjen and Julian raised their hand. Julian, is there anything you'd like to add, or shall we move to the next question?
Well, only very briefly to say, I mean, because Mohammed asked for sort of practical measures. I think that in a very, very difficult situation, things need to be maybe sort of taken apart a little bit. So, perhaps people have to do their theoretical exams under lockdown, and their practical exams need to be postponed. I mean, there are cases of people starting their apprenticeships after having completed theoretical exams and their practical assessments being postponed and that being accepted. So a little bit of flexibility may need to be negotiated about, not doing all the parts of assessment at the same time or in the same place, but sort of spreading them out. Maybe the learners can't be all brought together in one place to do their assessments together, but those assessments could be spread out over time so that learners could do their practical assessments in social, isolation. Or as Arjen says, maybe assessments could be done separately and videoed so that they can be assessed somewhere else. So, I know this is all very hard work and laborious, but I think sort of getting away from the unified assessment where everything happens in the same place in the same time towards more broken up things which are then assembled together to make an assessment is probably the only way forward in very difficult time.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'd like now to go to another comment, which is actually creating a very good connection with a question I had in mind for Tina. Regina is writing more or less the same situation in Albania as well regarding the top-bottom of impacting the role of the teachers. So Tina, you brought in a system perspective. You brought in the conversation, this system perspective. So can you give examples of how policymakers and donors can work together, even internationally, to improve the quality and impact of teaching, for example, through professional development? You work in a wide region. What's your opinion on this, Tina?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, there are very many opportunities in which donors and international partners can contribute to making those changes in the education and training systems. I will just mention now, and maybe if we have time, we can elaborate on that. We are planning now to actually invest with the donor in the system of building of quality culture or enhancing the quality culture in our region. So what we have noticed is that a lot of there is some kind of a contradiction from the level of policymakers where they supposedly create the atmosphere of autonomy of teachers and freedom for teachers. But on the other hand, the teachers are not fully able to exploit or to actually enjoy this freedom, because there is, on the other hand, a lot of fear of being punished for doing something wrong or for some kind of experimentation and so on. And COVID, as hard as it is, it's an excellent opportunity for this experimentation because there is no fear. We are all in this new situation. This is all a very big experiment. So the teachers finally have the freedom to look for answers, for methods that will really bring results. And what we are trying to do now with this international activities and international donors is that we soften this, let's say, inspection approach. So we want to invest in a different kind of evaluation or inspection, which is more supportive, where we would support the spirit of communication, which we already mentioned several times, so that the teachers feel like really what they say and what they experience is relevant, and that the inspectors are not here to punish, but to identify, what could be improved and then assist how this could be improved. And I think this is a very big step, like a mind shift towards a more supportive approach to schools, and then really embracing this quality culture, which basically means that mistakes are just an opportunity for like further cycles of improvement, of growth.
Thank you very much, Tina. And from your perspective, Julian, and following your analysis of these over 10,000 interviews, what can be done to make the continuous professional development of teachers more useful and productive, and maybe, like Tina just mentioned, more free?
Yeah, I mean, a lot's been said already. And I think, you know, an obvious point is indeed to focus upon the actual needs of teachers. You know, to listen to them, and to try and get the CPD to be match better what their needs are. A little bit too much of professional developing tends to be standardized. You know, it's what's on the catalogue, it's what we know how to provide. We've done it a few times before. It's not quite responsive enough to where teachers have got to, you know, what their personal development needs are, where, you know, so that's quite. So, for example, I mean, one of the major needs which comes up in our survey is that teachers want more skills to address the special learning needs of the special learning needs of different learners. And again, this is what teachers say, and so this should be a priority, but often it's not. And perhaps because we need more providers of training who themselves have got these skills and this know-how to help teachers to progress in this way. Also, I'd make the point that professional development is most effective if it's directly linked to teaching tasks. You know, if it's a question of, you know, we know you have to teach this next week, we know you're planning to teach this next term, and we can work with you to help you to do that in a new way and a better way. If it's a general theory, or if it's a general set of instructions which isn't directly related to something teachers have got to do, it's not so useful. It gets forgotten. It's not a priority. So it needs to be linked to actual tasks in the workplace. More collaborative, we said that before. It should be more orientated to what schools are trying to do. And I think that connects with a few things that Tina is saying, that if professional development is linked to where schools are trying to go, you know, what their priorities are, what they're trying to improve on, then there's more of a chance that teachers will work on that together, that they'll be supported by their managers, that if they're successful, it will be monitored and they will be recognized. If they're going off on individual improvements, they may have great value to them, but they're, you know, they're less likely to be sustained, and they're less likely ultimately to change the quality of teaching and the quality of learning for the students. And if I could just very lastly say is that professional development should be well linked to professional progression into careers, so that teachers are clear that if they're acquiring new skills, if they're developing new competencies, they connect to prospects for growth in their career, new positions of responsibility, better salaries, alternative activities. So they see themselves as growing, and they see the opportunities for themselves to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian, for mentioning the career opportunities, because I had in mind to ask Arjen if you envisage changes in the careers and mode of working of teachers. What can we imagine for career development, as far as career development is concerned, for teachers of the future? Arjen.
Yes, I think, I mean, a lot of people see teacher as sort of a career by itself. So it's a vocation. I want to become a teacher. Then it also is often a regulated profession, so you need to be qualified. But we're getting out of these traditional pathways. A lot of people decide to become a teacher later. And there was also one of the people here who said, what do I need to do to become a teacher? I have the skills. So it becomes more and more normal for people to get in and out of the teaching career, to move to be a teacher of young people, but also to start teaching adults, to start teaching to working companies, people working in companies coming into schools. There are a lot of regulations still that stop people from doing that. and that is probably also changing. But what I see is that it becomes more and more normal to be a teacher at a certain moment in your career, to switch to another career and to come back. So that means also that we need much more flexible ways of dealing with teachers, because it has always been very much controlled. You cannot teach math if if you didn't study math. If you studied physics, you cannot become a math teacher. In many countries, it's like that. And those things really will have to change if we want to really respond to the changes. So what I see is that there's going to be much different understanding of what is my occupation, not only for teachers, for a lot of other people too. But teaching becomes a skill that many of us will need, not only within schools, but also within other contexts. And we all have to become learners. And it's also something that we have to learn. So I think, and for teachers too, this is very important. If you want to be a good teacher, you need to be a good learner. So that is really, these things are changing. So the stereotypes are changing. How it will look like in 2030, 2040, 2050, that's very difficult to say. That also depends on us, what we would like it to look like. Yeah. But these things we are working on at the moment, and we hope to come back to you. We have this project, which is also Julian and me, were both involved in it, creating new learning. We can come back in another session and report back on what we found and how we see that these things are changing, because these things are going to change over time.
Thank you very much, Arjen. I'm sure that most of our followers will definitely be interested in knowing more. So we can, I think, already informally commit to engage in another conversation in the future. I think that the conversation is really close to the end, but I have one very important question for Julian. From your research, do teachers feel valued at all for what they do?
Well, we're here in the level of paradox, which is that if you ask teachers, do they feel satisfied with their work, by and large, they say yes. If you ask them whether they're excited by the challenges that Tina and Arjen have mentioned of facing change and becoming super teachers, they say yes. But if you ask them, do they feel valued by their society, then in 8 of the 9 countries which we surveyed, they say no, they don't. Only a minority say that they're valued. So we are in a difficult situation where perhaps a traditional high valuation of the teaching profession has changed. Other professions seem more attractive, or somehow what teachers are teaching doesn't seem so valuable, or something. So it's a bit of a crisis, and I have to confess it's not obvious what the solution to this is. What I would say though is I don't think it's something which teachers can necessarily expect other people are going to solve for them. I think to some extent it is a professional responsibility of teachers to build up some self-esteem and to be ready to innovate and develop, not individually, because I think that's impossible. You can't as an individual, rebuild faith in a profession. But I think it's something that collectively teachers should work at. Although obviously they're going to need the backings of the societies and the governments of the countries that they're working in.
Thank you very much, Julian, for this, and thanks to all of you who have been following this conversation. I'll bring home a number of inputs, but I'd like to go back to one of the first things that Tina shared that teachers have this special role of influencing the way students do see the world, which is pretty impactful, and even more in these times. So we are here to share the results of this very relevant study, which was run by my colleagues, listening to vocational teachers and principals. And the name itself of the study makes it very clear where we want to begin and where we want to get engaged in this conversation. Don't hesitate to come back next week for another conversation linked to the future of education. A warm thank to my distinguished guest, Tina Saric, Director of ERISEE, the Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much to my colleague Arjen Day, Senior Specialist in Qualification Systems at the ETF. Thank you, Arjen.
Thank you, and see you soon.
And thanks to my colleague Julian Stanley, Vet Teachers and Trainer Specialist at the ETF. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
And yes, indeed, thanks to all of you. Don't hesitate to go on our platform Open Space. You've seen the link popping up several times. And don't hesitate to download the report, Listening to Vocational Teachers and Principals. And I wish you all a very, very nice afternoon wherever you are. Thanks a million and goodbye.